This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Forget your wallet? It's all good because with Apple Pay, you can pay with a simple tap of your iPhone, the wallet you never forget, at millions of places worldwide, including websites, apps, and anywhere you see the contactless symbol. Security is built in with Face ID, so you don't have to worry about your cards getting lost or stolen. And the best part, you still earn the card rewards, points, and cash back you love. So say goodbye to the billfold, add your card to Apple Wallet, and start paying the Apple way. Terms apply.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, Apple TV has convinced him to take up golf. It's Andy Greenwald.
Do you think they could do what you could never do? Do you really think that? Come on.
To dig deep and find your inner swing. I mean, you got to get your swing thoughts together. That's the number one thing.
Do you think that my refusal to engage with golf is payback for your refusal to engage in the films of Miyazaki?
I think you've always been hard out on golf, even before anime. Greenwald, today we have a very special guest. We'll get right into that soon. Jesse Armstrong has joined us today to talk about his film Mountainhead and just to do a little bit of a general catch-up. We've had Jesse on the show several times when Succession was a going concern, and we were so excited to have him back to talk about the remarkable turnaround from screenplay to air. It was just a matter of months for Mountainhead, and the film seems to become more prescient as the days go on. Andy, it was a great conversation. We're so happy to have had him back on.
I don't want to step on our conversation, but I do want to note in advance that if people are tuning into it just to find out if you finally confessed your feelings about the Succession finale to the Succession creator, you did not. You did not. You are still keeping those pretty close to the chest. I
confessed my feelings last time he was on. I just haven't confessed them to you or our listeners.
Yeah, you were like, it was great.
Andy, I had a couple of things to the top for you here today. Number one was a little bit of news out of, and we're going to talk briefly about Apple TV's new show Stick. But I had another Apple TV note for you, which is that Presumed Innocent is coming back. We had heard bits and pieces about this and how Apple was not done with Presumed Innocent, even if the characters from the first season of the show perhaps were done with it. This new iteration of the show is going to star Rachel Brosnahan, soon to be seen as Lois Lane in James Gunn's Superman movie. It's based on not a Scott Turow novel, but rather a soon to be published or yet to be published thriller by an author named Joe Murray. I'm interested. Let's have more legal thrillers on TV, yada yada. But the thing I wanted to ask you about is this Apple's first foray into American X story? Basically, FX's prolific franchise that Ryan Murphy oversees, that is basically a clearinghouse for his genre storytelling, whether it's true crime or horror or what have you, and has now become, American Love Story and American this, and it's basically he's able to get a bunch of different kinds of shows on the air by putting it under this umbrella. What do you think of Apple's sort of effort to anthologize Presumed Innocent as their legal thriller vertical, maybe?
Well, I think it's a smart theory. I think that it's probably not going to be the thing that you and I would most want from it if it were up to us, which would be like all the best legal thriller books, that they could take a go on. I think we've talked in the past, back when we've done episodes that are more speculative of like what we'd like to see on TV. I think we basically spelled this out. Like there's a whole class of books written by different authors, mostly written in the 70s and 80s, mostly with cracked spines on the spinner rack at your local used bookstore at this point, that I feel like could be brought together under one title so that people, one television title that people could get used to and look forward to watching a certain type of entertainment.
It's right here. What are you guys doing?
Many of them are behind Chris right now since he's recording from home. It's likely not going to be that, but I do appreciate the nimbleness of the thinking here, which is we have a title that means something, and not just means something in terms of like the trials and tribulations of Rusty Sabich and his family, but Presumed Innocent is more or less, for people like, who are mildly literate, like that represents a type of legal thriller, a potboiler, a type of book you might read over the summer break. So making a anthology series that grabs a lot of different books that might fit that and putting it under one title makes a lot of sense to me. I think the other type of anthology that it might be, and this might even be the smarter play as a TV business goes, is a David Kelly anthology. So in the announcement, I don't have it in front of me, maybe you do, it does say who will be co-show running and AKA writing the show. It is not a full David E. Kelly production. And also a lot of like legacy producers from the first season will continue to get their episodic credit, like Scott Turow and Jake Gyllenhaal, who presumably will not be too creatively involved in this. But
probably not.
When we did our showrunner conversation, like the second and third acts of showrunners the other week, I think we mentioned David E. Kelly as a type of career that isn't necessarily repeatable, and also how adaptable he's proven to be. That he used to be the guy that churned out 24 episodes of something every year that was thought-provoking and quirky and fun, and now he's kind of the guy to prestige up or kind of mainstream down your cable or streaming series. And over the past few years, he's done, how many shows has he had his name on that has he been affiliated with?
Maybe half a dozen. Yeah.
And that's everything from what was the Hugh Grant, Nicole Kidman, The Undoing, I feel like.
The Undoing, yeah. The cigars,
I want to say
sure.
was one, and Big Little Lies, right? Is a David E. Kelly.
I think he works on Nine Perfect Strangers, doesn't he?
Right. So he has become kind of a brand unto himself, but those are 3 different series that all had to like launch from the ground up and are on different services. This might be a smart way for Apple to be like, you know that thing you do where you make classy thrillers with fancy people? Just do it here.
Right.
So that kind of makes sense to me. All of this said,
Erica Lopez is the showrunner or co-showrunner.
Okay. All of that said, I do think you owe our listeners full transparency as to what you first thought when you read the press release about season 2 casting.
Oh yeah,
Presumed
sure.
Innocent.
I was slightly taken aback because I thought this series starred Rachel Bloom. I got my Rachel's confused.
Of My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Was that the...
Yeah. Yes. I just didn't peg her as necessarily as doing an erotic legal thriller, but here we go, you know? Like...
For what it's worth, Rachel Brosnahan gives big, I want to be in an erotic legal thriller vibes. I just feel like there's some actors who just, that's what they put out, and I think that's good for her.
It's also fascinating to me that, Sean and Amanda and our pod, the big picture and the watch seem to have like this cross-pod conversation about TV actors, movie actors, choices that people make from one film to a series to a film to whatever their choices are. And I think it says something about the current sort of landscape that the person who is the second lead of a Superman movie is like, okay, I'm going to do a series after that.
Sure. I mean, also, listen, I think everybody here understands the second Superman movie isn't promised anymore. You know what I mean? It's tough out here for everybody. I also like the way you framed it, that there's a cross conversation between 2 distinct podcasts. Like, if only there was a swing voter that could speak to the constituencies of both podcasts. Perhaps he could unite the feeds.
I try my best.
You do.
Let's talk briefly about Stick. The first 3 episodes went up on Apple. This is a show from Jason Keller starring Owen Wilson and Mark Maron about a down on his luck pro golfer working as like a club fitter at a sporting goods store, just kind of bumming around, who comes across a golf prodigy, a 17-year-old hot-headed golf prodigy named Santi, and decides to take him on a road trip of qualification tournaments and junior tournaments as he like tries to ride this kid to the sort of stratospheric levels of fame that you would associate with, like, say, a Tiger Woods or a Jordan Spieth or something like that. This show has a really good kind of elevator pitch, which is essentially Ted Lasso meets Tin Cup. I really enjoyed the first season of Ted Lasso. I love Tin Cup. I also play golf and think a lot about golf, consume a lot of golf content, which actually weirdly might make me a little bit outside of the target audience for this show in a strange way. I think sometimes I get very fired up for stuff that is playing to my interests. And sometimes those are the very things that I find tonally a little bit off or fall a little bit flat for me. I really enjoy Owen Wilson, and I really enjoy Mark Maron, and I think that there is some stuff to like, and there's nothing like offensively bad about a series where Judy Greer and Owen Wilson are sharing scenes together.
Totally.
There are points in this show where I'm like, I just feel like they like missed a beat with like some of the things that make golf funny or interesting or lively or a place where someone might spend a ton of time. And it kind of almost feels like they plugged in something into like a pre-existing idea. They're like, and what if he plays golf, but didn't take it that much further? There's a scene in the second episode where Wilson is giving Santi a lesson. Wilson plays a guy named Price. He's giving Santi a lesson and doing a club fitting, which is where you like basically are seeing how the person swings and adjusting their clubs size wise and loft wise and all these different things to fit their game. And I am pretty sure Owen Wilson like probably likes golf, but it doesn't seem like he's familiar with it. Like he says the words, he says that like, but he doesn't like say them the way people say them. Do you know what I mean?
No, what do you mean?
Like launch angle, like he just kind of like, it feels like he's kind of memorized them. And I also have memorized them. I don't really know what my launch angle is, but like, do you understand what I'm saying? Where you're kind of like, this feels like something you're reading rather than living.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that is critical about the show, but like, do you think that's a performance issue, or are you saying that
I don't know
schematics of the show, the golf being the exoskeleton, feels added? Meaning, like Santi could have been avoiding any sport because of a connection to his late father for the tear-jerking reasons why he's turned his back on his destiny. Golf
there's a really good, I think
with.
that the tension that they've kind of come across, which is that like lots of people have the physical tools or the talent to play golf. It's really, are you able to deal with failure on a individual and constant level? This
is why I don't do it. I have all the physical tools.
And there is like that feeling of like, you will hit a good shot and just be like, I've fixed my swing.
Right.
I have gone to heaven. I should join the Corn Ferry and try to qualify for the US Open. And then the next shot you hit will break a window and you're like, oh, I guess I forgot how to play golf. Like that is the margins that you're playing with are really slim, and they get at that. So I'm not trying to say that they have no familiarity with the game or that the show doesn't seem to understand the sport. But there was like, even there's some shots when they first take Santi out on the course. Mark Maron's character is sort of like this wizened old, golf coach. Is he an agent? I can't remember. Is he
he ends up being the caddy.
Yeah, caddy. So he's like just a guy around the game, and they take Santi out on the course to see how he hits. Mark Maron's this reluctant participant in this whole thing. And they shoot a lot of the scenes with a very shallow depth of field, so that the only thing really in focus are the people. Mm-hmm. And so you don't really even get like a sense of the environment. And like one of the things that's interesting about golf courses is that like municipal courses are really like beat up and kind of like played through, and like they don't get like as much care as like private courses, but they have a lot of personality and there's lots of different people out there playing golf. And like you just feel like they shot it.
Yeah.
I know they didn't shoot it on the volume, but it feels kind of anonymous to me.
I think that's a very well observed criticism, and also sort of a insight into the type of show that either Apple wants it to be or that Jason Keller felt comfortable making it. And there's an argument to be made too that it is a challenge when you're starting something from scratch. This is an original idea, that you want to make sure that the aperture isn't too wide, because you want to be able to build at least a few characters, let alone too many. The flip side of that would be some of our criticisms about Your Friends and Neighbors, which felt way too broad and not very deep. This show definitely spends a lot of time on its primary characters. By the way, side note, I appreciated what you just said about the way golf makes you feel. I feel like podcasting gives me that same momentary high and despairing low, where I feel like I'm good at it for one episode, and then Severance comes back for season 2, and I'm just in a K-hole of my own making for 10 weeks. So I think I'm good. I don't need to go on the course with you. My feelings about the show, kind of golf aside, kind of track with what you're saying.
Yeah, I wanted to know as somebody who's not a stick man, like.
I have no ill will in my heart towards the show whatsoever. Sometimes I get my dander up about the darndest things, but like Owen Wilson, Mark Maron, and Judy Greer, all of whom I love, getting a paycheck, having a relaxed, lived-in opportunity to do a performance, I'm pretty good with that.
Yeah, Owen Wilson making jokes about the Hurt Locker, like I'm totally fine with it. I think I'm just picking a nit because I'm like, oh wow, like this is actually about something I know a little bit about, so it's a little bit funny to see it. Yeah,
like the Wire season 5, but the just like the Wire season 5. The criticism that I do want to bring up is a broader criticism about the Apple project, which good shows come out on Apple. We talk about them and we really enjoy them. Very good shows tend to come out from Apple's European or UK arm. The sense that I get, I want to be clear, based on nothing. I have not met there. I have not developed there. I don't talk to people who do with any regularity. The sense I get there is that it is, and maybe you can give me like a good sports analogy for this about like certain teams that operate this way. If you show up knowing exactly what you want to do and can execute on it, you can probably get away with something pretty special because they have a lot of money and they will back you. If you show up there in need of coaching or a developmental process, it does seem like Santi, if I may, it does seem like you're entering into a different kind of arena because much like your friends and neighbors, the stick pilot begins 4 separate times. It meanders through, I don't know, what's the analogy, 36 holes? Like it is over 40 plus minutes. I am not here, I want to be very clear, I'm not here to give notes or say that I could do better. I'm just saying that while watching this pilot, there were scenes, like the opening scene of the show, which is a montage of golf greatness that Owen Wilson is monologuing to, and then it cuts to him basically upselling a rando suburban dad on a club he probably doesn't need, is a very well executed opening scene to a pilot. 15 or so, well, I'm probably being dramatic, 8 to 11 minutes later, there is another pretty effective opening scene where Owen Wilson is at a bar drinking and Mark Maron in his first appearance starts heckling him saying, didn't you used to be somebody? And then he ends up, showing that he's still somebody by putting at the bar, missing it. And then you realize they're in on it together. They run this scam to get money. And I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good introductory scene to these characters in this world. In between these scenes, there's Owen Wilson coming home and Judy Greer is there. And we learn that they used to be married, information that is conveyed in a secondary scene where they meet at her lawyer's office. After that, there's a scene where he cleans the pool, but before that, listens to classic rock, gets really high, and dances around. I think I kind of got the vibe that he was a dude who liked to puff a J, if you know what I mean, fellow kids. Like, that wasn't information that I really needed at that moment. Mm-hmm. So the charms of the show, from my experience watching it, are just really muted and muffled by just too muchness. Like you made the sale. This could be just an enjoyable, emotional, Ted Lasso-y kind of half-hour enterprise. And it's just packed to the gills with extra stuff that leaves me feeling, it's not bored. It just leaves me feeling kind of squished and deadened in a way that is not my preferred way to deal with TV. Do you know what I mean? It ends up in this sort of squishy streaming era. We have big stars and we have 46 minutes, so we're going to use all of them, as opposed to like a super tight 28, and we get it. Because, guys, it's Owen Wilson as a failed golfer. You had me at hello, or at 4, I guess would be the correct joke.
Do you think that Owen Wilson is a failed golfer? I mean, because if you take Tin Cup, it's like it's just a character study of this guy Roy who famously flamed out, and then has tried to rebuild his career. He's working at a driving range in Texas, and then he tries to qualify for the U.S. Open again. Is the added element of it's not only this guy's midlife crisis, his divorce, his crossroads, but he is now also the father figure for a kid. Yeah. And, inserting himself into this person. Like, it is an extra layer of cream cheese that I don't know. It's not that I do or don't want it. It's just like, it's a lot to kind of juggle. Like you're saying, there's 8 characters already, where you're like, oh, okay, so this is this person's line, this is this person's line.
There's not I don't feel like there's a bad intention bone in the show's body. So I'm not here to bury it for that reason. I didn't find it cynical. I found it kind of sweet. But there is a and maybe the way to look at the point I'm about to make is through the lens of what you were saying. Like there's just a lot of mouths to feed here, both in terms of literally characters, but also the things that it wants to accomplish and what it wants to talk about. There's just not necessarily room to individuate or distinguish what makes some of these people particularly appealing or special. There's a great tradition, like I'm not going to pretend this is only in recent TV, like just in American entertainment, of shows about frustrating yet lovable man-children who really should learn their lesson, but their ex-wives just can't quit them. And Your Friends and Neighbors was one of those. Landman is one of those. Switch is one of those. Switch Stick is one of those. And it's like, it feels a little arrested to me. Like, I think, again, I'm not pitching, Breaking Bad on the Live tour, but I do think like a guy who's fallen on tougher times, it could still be a comedy, but it could have some element of stakes or peril to it. It doesn't have to be squishy. But the show is squishy, and again, that might be something that Apple wants. Apple things, and I don't know whether it's because of the lack of notes, the lack of editing, but they do drift towards squish when left unattended. And when it comes to Ted Lasso, a show that didn't work for me because of the squishiness, it's clearly successful. When it comes to a show like Shrinking, which from everything I've heard, improved a lot and might be everything I understand about Shrinking, and I apologize for not engaging with it past the first few episodes of the first season, suggests that it is more worthy than this kind of backhanded comments that I'm making about it. But the reason that I didn't stick with it is because it did seem to really still be operating in a key of squish. That's not for me, but there is an audience for that.
So I would just recommend, if people are looking for a sports comedy to be watching right now, it's never too late to get into Shoresy. That's the entire series is streaming on Hulu. And honestly, like as sitcoms go, newly released sitcoms, the second season of Tires is really good on Netflix. So I have those two recommendations to make. Andy, we should get into our interview with Jesse. We talked about Mountainhead a couple of weeks ago when it was released, so you can go back and listen to our conversation there. But it was great to get his insights into the filmmaking process, the writing process, and also the process of diving deep into this world of sort of the technological vanguard and people who are making decisions that obviously have a lot of consequences.
Chris and I are delighted to be joined once again, and unfortunately once again remotely, by the great Jesse Armstrong. Jesse, thank you so much. We were so happy to talk to you for the Succession series finale 2 years ago, and now you've joined us for the America series finale, which is very kind.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sad not to be here, not to be with you. You know, we're all in LA today, but separated by military forces.
Yes. So on that, I think that seems a good place to start in our conversation about Mountainhead, a film that Chris and I both really, really enjoyed. As you said, we are speaking to you remotely today, despite being in the same city, because our offices are currently closed due to a government-escalated clash. There are fake images of our city, which you are currently in. It's fine. You can go get a matcha latte right now if you want. Fake images are being manipulated, spread through the internet, further inflaming tensions. And all of this is perhaps to distract from an embarrassing tech bro catfight between the richest man in the world and the president of the United States. That said, how are you feeling, writer?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. That's well written. There's a lot to unpack in there. I think the only thing I've got that I would say semi seriously is I guess I don't feel like I'm not intending to be a kind of technological soothsayer. I haven't got the level of knowledge. I'm not embedded in the tech and the way it's developing. The kind of tech element of the Mountainhead story, which is essentially a backdrop. It's not a completely crazy hypothesis that there could be a collision between information manipulation and political crises and street demonstrations. But yeah, that's the backdrop. That's the Black Mirror-y bit that could have been the jumping off point for a Charlie Brooker film. So yeah, I'm interested in that bit, but I feel deeply or as uninformed as probably most other citizens.
I was curious if Andy alluded to this with his first question, Jesse. We want to talk to you about a bunch of different elements of this film, but what are some of the challenges for you, especially as you live in the weeks after its release, like of making prescient art or making maybe art that is obviously very much of the moment? Because I've been very fascinated to read some of the responses that maybe take issue with, like, oh, it wouldn't be like this. It's actually like this, or clearly it's overstating something for the sake of satire. Whereas I kind of find this film disturbingly unsatirical at points. But when you're considering making something that's obviously going to feel like, hot button keywords are coming up. Like, what are some of the things you're thinking about when it comes to the contemporaneousness of the art you're making?
Yeah, luckily, that stuff doesn't come, and maybe audiences find it too pat or too easy. That stuff doesn't come too hard to me. I think, I worked on the thick of it, a little tiny bit on Veep, and a lot on In the Loop, the political film that came out with Armando, out of that world of political satire. And I guess kind of a little bit of geopolitical or political world building I find easy to imagine. I don't need too much information about the practicalities of how the technology is going to develop to provide what I hope is a reasonable playing field of expectations. Your question about like, what are you, I don't find there's a particular anxiety about writing in this like the political cultural munge that we're all living in right now, right? And you throw 100 darts at the dartboard of current events, and I'm not trying to hit a bullseye of like, boom. If the events of Mountainhead happened tomorrow, which I don't think they would, I would not feel pleased. A terrible event. Because it's not a prediction game. What I'm interested in is the psychology of the men portrayed. That's not to say there's not some kind of fun to be had, sort of in the way of like down the pub talking with friends about like, oh wow, that thing was a bit like the real thing that happened. Those things are kind of they fluoresce a bit, don't they? When something aligns in the world and in fiction. But I guess it's a much more general sense of the nowness which you're trying to capture. So yeah, I don't get too anxious about whether we've got it right. I remember, this is a long answer, but when we were making the film, people were like, "Oh, this is so." Sometimes people, in a encouraging way, say, "Oh, this is so like." So prescient. We were doing Doge was happening, and in a way, like Doge really isn't evidently predicted in the film or suggested. The group of tech guys we have portrayed are rather sequestrated away from government, and that was when that was a period when the film was conceived and when it was written, and guess what? Doge has indeed fizzled out in the since.
So I think we all agree the events of Mountainhead aren't likely to happen tomorrow or next week. But when they do happen after Labor Day, how many texts will you be sending, just like with a part of your brain being like, I told you so, and who is receiving those texts?
Yeah, no, I just don't think anything. I hope nothing like that happens. If I had to put a bet on it, I would think probably not. I don't think, we are seeing amazing image generation and news report generation capabilities. I think human beings are so subtle and quick to adapt to change. I think we'll probably stay just ahead of the curve, which is where we need to be. So yeah, and when things have gone dreadfully wrong in that regard, like they did for Facebook in Myanmar, it is, as I think somebody says in the film, it tends to be where technology hits in a market or a nation where people aren't quite keyed into how fast the tech is moving, or in that case, they didn't have the moderators to be anywhere near as quick as they needed to be.
So, Jesse, you did allude to a moment ago, too, that when you were making the film, Doge was happening. This is a subtle way of saying that you made this movie like 2 months ago. And to the point where Chris and I got an email, like anyone on the HBO press release got an email saying, and then coming in the spring, Jesse Armstrong's debut film, blah, blah, blah. And Chris texted me and he said, "Is Jesse really putting out a film in 8 weeks?" And I said, "It's a typo." Just absolute confidence that it would be the spring of 2026. That was not the case. So I wondered if you could just talk us a bit through the decision-making that led to such an accelerated process. What was exciting about that for you? And then also what may have been, and I'll just throw a word out here, terrifying.
Yeah, fear. It's a lot of fear. Fear of like not the specific technological, political moment moving on beyond the world that I wanted to write in the film, but like the cultural moment that I'd write something that it did have a very clear relationship to now, and it would feel tired in that more general way that you sometimes get. So fear of missing that moment, fear that that I wouldn't be able to sort of direct a film. So I thought it'd be smart to sort of run at it with almost no time to breathe between the pitch and the casting and the hiring of the crew, and a certain amount of excitement. I have seen before around projects that you can get this kind of positive feedback loop between the anxiety, constraints, drive to make the thing and the product itself, that you get this kind of feedback loop, right? Of we haven't got enough time, we haven't got enough money, we haven't got enough space, and nor do some of the characters. I guess that they have plenty of money, but they don't have the space or time. So I quite like that, being in the same boat as the characters feeling, if you can kind of manipulate it.
Was the cast appraised of and on board with and even energized by this quick turnaround time? Because typically for an actor, I'm sure that they're like, oh, I sign on for something and it takes a year, if not way more, for that to ever reach an audience. Was there something energizing about everybody's participation in something that would hit the market so fast?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, mostly it was a case of being on set and not being able to believe what we would, how quickly we were going to try and achieve, especially the pre-production, the post-production elements. In a way, the shoot was short, like 22 days, but it wasn't crazy for a play-like film in basically one location. So the days were fine. We didn't go too long, or that pressure wasn't great. But yeah, it was weird to think it was going to be on TV like a month after we 2 months after we wrapped. So I think the biggest practical hurdle was it is a kind of play-like script, and there were just a lot of words for the actors to learn who, some of them only had, like 3 weeks. All of them only had 2 weeks of a locked script to learn. So that was tough.
Who is responsible for that? So many words. God, name and shame him. So
Jesse, the director, would be like, "Do you believe I have to work with this shit?" For Jesse, the writer.
So Jesse, you had on the list of executive producers are some very talented and very familiar names from anyone who's a fan of Succession: Frank Rich, Lucy Preble, John Brown, Tony Roach, Will Tracy, even Mark Mylod, who was the directing producer of the show, are all there. How did you utilize that uniquely gifted brain trust in the development of the film? And I guess as a follow-up, like, how did you communicate to them, the veterans of Succession, what was different about this project?
Yeah, I just used them all to kind of, lots of different ways, but basically to assuage that fear of like, oh, I've pitched this. Casey Bloys at HBO has said, yes, the timeline is tight. Can we do it? Is it a good idea? So like I checked in early with Frank Rich, who was an executive producer on Succession, like, is this doable? Is this a good idea? Mark Mylod was the director of many of the best episodes of Succession, and I sought his advice about whether he thought I could do it, and like lots of practical things, what pencils he used on set to write his notes, a bunch of stuff like that. And then those writer executive producers, Lucy, Tony, John, and Will, I used very specifically to like pitch them the idea early on and like, please be honest with me. Do you think this is any good? And then we did a really short version of a room. We did just 1 week, and where I went in with the whole story really, but we then went through it, improved it, got a bunch of ideas, lines, bits and pieces that then I was able to go away and write the script in this very short. I wrote the first draft probably in 10 days and then refined it over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, they were all different, but they were all kind of reassuring touchstones to check in with about the viability of the project.
I was wondering about your writing process because I think especially in something that felt like you alluded to, almost like a play, because of the limited amount of settings within Mountainhead, and they're moving through this house, which is quite expansive, but for the most part, it's this four-hander, and they're all kind of on screen mostly at the same time. I love harvesting anecdotes about screenwriting. Like Aaron Sorkin talks about performing all the parts in his room, and sometimes he'll take walks and he's doing the parts and he doesn't even know where he's walked to. He has these sort of fugue states. Other people, David Milch lies down with we used to lie down with his bad back and dictate. Do you say these lines out loud? Do you bounce them off other people and have them? How do you kind of find the inimitable rhythm that you've sort of developed as an almost signature style?
Is there an audio track of you and Tony Roach going Khashoggi, Khashoggi, being like, yeah, that'll work?
No, I mean, there's a bunch of shards of funny lines, turns of phrase come out of the room that are there kind of in a document or in my brain to be inserted. But yeah, normally I'm a normal writer, screenwriter. I sit there and work, and some of it feels very much like work. And if you had a camera, you'd see a lot of humming and hawing and sitting around, looking at the paper, looking out the window. And then occasionally you get the William Goldman hot streak, and you feel I can lose myself for a little while. And I've always loved writing ensemble pieces, and I don't think I say the words out loud, but I do sometimes hit a nice little golden 40 minutes, hour where I feel a little bit omniscient in the room, and I feel I know what everyone is thinking and what they would say and what their emotional position to the, usually it's an argument of some kind that's being chewed away. I can feel it happening live, and that's the best part probably of all of my creative work, is when you have those times, and yeah, so that's what I'd say about that, I guess.
That's really cool.
Question. So Chris asked about writing. I did want to ask about directing. You chose to direct this yourself. I was wondering your decision-making and thought process in wanting to do it. And then once you got in the chair for it, what being in the director's chair made easier for you about the creative process, and what did you find maybe frustrating or challenging?
Good. It's a good question. Yeah, I just wanted to give it a go. It's so interesting. And as you get more and more involved in filmmaking, TV and film, it's such a crucial role. So I wanted to try it. On Succession, it felt rude to the brilliant, Becky Martins, Lorene Scafari's, Mark Mylod's, Andre, all these brilliant directors to wade in and say, stand back. I think I've got it. I can do this too. So I wanted to wait till it was another project. And this one was particularly amenable, maybe because I gathered so many Succession people around. It's shot in a very Succession way with two cameras, very practical lighting by the brilliant Marcel Ziskind, who's the DP. So it felt achievable by me. It didn't seem like a overreach when I said it that I could do it. In terms of the being there on the day, yeah, compared to being a showrunner, there's just a little bit more responsibility. A showrunner can show up at 9 p.m. and look at the props and the setup and be the annoying person who says, "Is that hat a bit big?" And like, hold on, the coffee. I think is that coffee machine the right? Whereas the director, if the people come up and ask you those questions, you're suddenly very protective and like, no, the coffee machine's fine. Step the fuck back. I just need to talk to the actors. So there's a certain just extra level of practical engagement. I really enjoyed it because after some initial anxiety about presenting myself as a director to illustrious actors, they were really nice, and I'm, the only thing I think I have on my side as a showrunner and as a director is I try as much as I can never to bullshit anyone. If I and it gets easier the more experienced you are, right? Because they sort of have a level of trust, so you're able to say I don't know about more things, and it doesn't kind of pop that bubble of trust in you about the project. You can say, I don't know about that. Actually, I'd not thought about it. Let's talk about it together. And then hopefully 80% of things, 90% of things I have thought about, and I've got a good answer, and or I've got an answer at least. So I guess that's the bit that I love, is talking to the actors, working with the actors, and a little bit of then enjoying with Marcel, almost pretending to be a director and looking at the frame.
Some lens talk, right?
A little bit of lens talk, nodding knowledgeably. And Marcel is just a delightful human being. And so having someone who I could slightly be self-mocking about, my lack of knowledge about anamorphic lenses and aspect ratios was good, so that I could tell him, this is what we're trying to achieve. I think you tell me if you think we're doing it in a good way.
So I appreciate everything you just said in that lovely answer, but I do want to ask you about the coffee machines. But more specifically, one of the things that I just reveled in watching this film was the savage and yet honest reflection on how some of the most powerful and rich people in the world have the worst taste. And I wondered how you, now in the director's chair, did that balancing act of wanting to make something visually compelling and interesting and dynamic, but also truthfully capturing a world of half zips and pretzel rolls and not much else.
And all the characters show up and they're like, this is a shitty house.
Yes, and
it's like they are in a boring place. Yeah,
that is a tightrope walk, right? Because you want the film to look good. So how did that play into your decision-making process? Yeah,
probably, 50% luck, 50% Stephen Carter, production designer. The luck, I guess, or the luck which we set ourselves up for, was shooting in Utah with big windows, and the beauty is provided mostly by Utah and the sense of scope and scale out the windows and around the house. And then the interiors. Yeah, Stephen's a maestro who I worked with on Succession, and good at that. We've looked at a lot of those rooms now, and we were struck once again. We scouted for houses for a little while altogether in Canada and in the US, and I don't want to be. Oh, I can't not be rude. We went to a lot of rich people's houses. Some of them were very decent, nice people, but the taste is. It's just extraordinarily bland on the whole. I think it's scary, maybe having a big house. A lot of the people are maybe decision makers are men, and they outsource it, and then they pick oatmeal, they pick cream, and they pick the most sort of boring style choices imaginable, and it's very oppressive when you go to a lot of those places, and it kind of it seeps into you, and so I think me and Stephen both had a good sense of that's right. They have that sort of depressing color. That's the correct art choice for this banal, international, endlessly repeatable style.
God, it would be so awkward if Steve Carell showed up on set the first day and was like, "This is gorgeous." It's like when I got paid off The Office, I bought a place like this.
That's me with Matthew McFadden's clothing in Succession. I was always whenever he showed up, I was like, "I think Tom's wearing. Where did Tom get those jumpers?" He's really rocking that little. Go
off, Tom!
I'd like one of those.
You mentioned Steve Carell. And watching this film made me realize how little baggage I brought with me to the cast of Succession. So even though I obviously admire Brian Cox from Manhunter and several, tons of other stuff, I liked Jeremy Strong a lot and knew who Kieran Culkin was. I think I kind of came into that with no preconceived notions of what these characters were going to turn into or even become. And then quite the opposite happened with Mountainhead, where in some ways you're working against what people kind of bring to a Steve Carell role, or bring. Honestly, I thought you did some very interesting things with Rami, where Rami is a very empathetic performer. And so Jeff immediately becomes the moral center of the film, even though he has some culpability as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about casting these, for lack of a better term, better known performers? And then I actually have a follow-up about one who is less well known, but who I was quite struck by.
Yeah. Francine Maisler, brilliant casting director. What did we go into it with? Steve was the first person we approached. I thought he'd be perfect for Randall. You know, although he's so well known, you know, between you know, his more comedic roles and Foxcatcher and Morning Show, like he's although he is unbelievably well known, he's such a shapeshifter that I felt like he had room to create a new role. So, and I just wanted that authority, you know, I love comedy actors. I think they 95% have all the dramatic facility you could ever need, as well as being able to know exactly where the comedy is when you need it. So I've just admired him for a long time, and him saying yes was a big part of the momentum of what at a certain point was quite a rackety train on the rails heading towards an ambitious production date. So yeah, that was fantastic. Everyone else was a read, a sort of casting decision. Rami I admired from his show, and just as you say, I thought that this was going to help his arc, which his is probably the most tragic arc within the film, between a sort of half knowing, a anxiety and a accommodation, and I thought that his inherent likability and the roles he's played before would help with that. Jason was just he's just so funny. I love his work across his career, but I also felt like he had some noodles of comic potential that I could write towards, that made me very excited as soon as he we saw a tape of him playing the character. So it was like one was a straight offer, the other was like, oh my god, these people feel perfect for the roles. Once I did a little bit of work with them on over video for auditions. And I guess you're going to ask about Corey, who's remarkable.
I was. Yeah, I mean, he's the sort of nuclear reactor of this thing, and when he's on screen, I mean, like, even just the physicality of the performance, the way he like kind of wings around the house and is always sort of flexing and getting high off of his own endorphins and all of these things. And it's just such a great, I don't even know if I have a question as much as I did not. I really loved him in Saturday Night, but I did not expect to see this.
He's so great. And, you know, it reminds me of the sort of what we needed from Jeremy in Succession, in that without his dynamo of what is it? A dynamo of desire, aggression, of confidence, that the thing could have become flaccid. And he's just so important at providing this want, this huge want at the middle of the film. So yeah, I think it was the role I was probably most anxious about casting, because, you know, they say he's the richest man in the world. He's not. He's very different from Musk, right? There's a bit of Zuck, a bit of maybe Sam Altman, a bit of a bunch of those people in there, but he needed this sort of charisma and drive. And if we couldn't find it, I knew we'd be in trouble. So that was probably the hardest I punched the air when we saw his tape, because he did it right away when we watched him.
One of the things that Chris and I talk a lot about generally on our podcast, but then also very much in relation to Succession, and then again about Mountainhead, is that how long-running serialized shows on TV turn TV into a kind of an empathy machine, where regardless of the character's behavior, inevitably, because of our intimacy with them and the point of view, we start to feel for them, even as they do potentially monstrous things. That famously happened with, you know, a Breaking Bad or a Sopranos. The journey of a lot of people watching Succession followed a similar arc, where there were plenty of think pieces or reviews after the first 3 episodes saying, well, these are bad people. Thus, you know, I am not a bad person, and why would I want to watch this? those concerns went out the window as we got to know these people and feel for them and see their humanity, even as they spiraled the morality drain. Film is a different medium entirely. And in film, you can be more didactic and you can be harsher, stronger brushstrokes, leave a bruise, I think, in a way with the characters. I wonder if you agree with that, first of all, because I'm enjoying your considering face very much as I unspool this question. I guess I also wonder how you used film differently, knowing that our time with these characters would be less intense, and thus our connection to them or our feelings about them would be just inevitably different.
Yeah, 90%. It's a great question, and your summary of the differences I find intriguing. I think I buy it, and I certainly feel that thing about the empathy development that comes whether you want it or not. And I've written lots of characters who I'm surprised to see people warm to, although never disappointed. I always like it, and I think it's human, and I would never disdain or disregard that human connection to people, because if you didn't have that, we're really fucked, right? If you can't see the humanity of our fellow people. But as you say, I think I was half aware of what you describe, right? The working title of this film was Espresso, because I knew it was going to be sort of short, intense,
bitter.
And somewhat bitter. Yeah. So and it's in my mind, it's much more of a comedy than Succession. It's not a hit piece in that I don't intend it to the characters in it to relate to people in the real world, but it's kind of a hit job in that it's like a drive-by. It's like it's moving pretty fast. It's in, it's out. Mm-hmm. There it is. The proposition is pretty clear. It's somewhat provocative, I guess, and people will be in some ways not enjoy even find it unwelcome to think that I have the right to try and provoke them, like reject the whole proposition of it. And I kind of get that. But if you find it an amenable way to think about these people, and in particular see some of the philosophies which are at large in Silicon Valley, as it used to be called, the tech world, I think it's a pretty decent primer in the way that some of those people are thinking about the world. So yeah, I it's narrower. I thought this is going to be narrower. I can't give you the worlds of relationships which are implied and sometimes explored in Succession, and that's okay. It's an espresso shot, and it might keep you up all night, or it might not be to your taste. But that was pretty. I was prepared for that going in.
That analogy kept getting better. They keep you up all night. You landed that. That was great.
It would be bad if I was like, espresso, it revives me. It gets me ready for my day. It prepares me for everything I need to do. I know that this...
Only enjoyed really by Italian truckers.
True. Well, that's your main constituency.
Well, Max is expanding internationally, so I feel like Casey would be okay with it.
Now that if they finish Gomorrah in time, they can watch, Jesse, I know that the origins of this came from writing a book review for the Times Literary Supplement. And so obviously there's this genesis. You do the research, you're reading about the way that these guys talk, the way that these guys think, how they use vocabulary as a shield, but also as like a weapon. And I was wondering what it is about the jargon. I mean, maybe it could be maybe truckers have jargon that would be attractive to write in a vocabulary that would be fun to play with. But is there something about the way that these guys have a term or a code or a nickname or an acronym or something for everything that allows these characters, and in your mind, perhaps these people, to distance themselves from the consequences of their actions? Because that was something that was really leaping off the screen with me. I was just rewatching it this morning, and whether it's their sort of humor, but also literally the words they're using seems to allow them to push this off a little bit.
Yeah, it's another great question. The origins of this were vaguely, when I didn't realize it at the time. I wrote this piece for the Times Literary Supplement, owned by Rupert Murdoch, a great benefactor of my career, it turns, in ways I didn't expect. So wrote that piece for TLS, and that was about Sam Bankman-Fried. The language, especially in that piece, is in the Michael Lewis book, The Language of Effective Altruism, is interesting from one angle, and it's very funny from another. I think this is also retrospective analysis, but I think the language functions. I'm very interested in language. I love it. That's, and when my ear gets into, or I think I've dialed my ear into a culture or a subculture, it's like another one of those moments when I can feel everyone in the room. It's like, I know how these people speak, and that releases me in a very important way to be able to enter the world. And I love it. And I think, though, as you say, acronyms, jargon, technical terms can operate in all sorts of different ways. In some ways, I used to think, and I don't know if we discussed this, but like Succession sometimes started to seem to me to be a horror story about language losing its meaning, that the way they would frame and reframe arguments, and that particular milieu, TV, cable news world and print media, that their obfuscations also about themselves were part of what the show was about at some level. I feel like language operates in a very different way in this tech world, and in some ways, I think it does distance, just as you say, right? If you listen to Lex Friedman and All In and the TED Talks that are around, and BG Squared and all these people talking, the language becomes forceps to hold really quite radioactive ideas, which they recognize too, but it provides this very masculine distance and ability to talk about, the incredible job losses that are going to come with AI, and with coded by talking about the opportunities which they see as well. So the language is both those sort of forceps and this kind of depersonalizing, just as you say, but also, I guess, they try and kill someone in this film, and it's silly and dumb, but they do try and do it. I don't think they ever would have tried to murder someone in Succession. It would have been ludicrous in all sorts of ways. But seeing these people follow the logic of their own arguments was really important to me, and I think that's the difference for me about their use of language. They're really invested in logic to an extraordinary degree, with a huge faith in it. And I don't disdain logic, and I don't disdain the things that some of those people have achieved, but the confidence, the unwarranted confidence that it can provide, is one of the truly, scary things of the current moment.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say that there's a moment about midway through where I believe it's after Venice has talked to the president, and he's just like, I just want to push through. I want to basically, he's essentially saying he wants to double down and just just spray the world with this slop, and that will kind of take us to this new nirvana. And it's so interesting how much of their language almost describes a physicality to something that actually involves no physical effort whatsoever. I mean, sure, coding is hard or whatever, but it's not like these guys are pushing boulders up hills. They're just yes, flip this switch and change this to a 0 instead of a 1. But they're making it sound like they're defending Troy. And so I really liked the idea that you can almost change the nature of your reality based on how you describe it, which I guess is probably what powerful people have been doing for as long as there's been power.
Yeah, and it's salesmanship. Have you seen the Sam Altman post today about the gentle singularity? And it's a sort of, I would say, not terribly persuasive, but sort of quite, from one angle, quite funny pitch on the future of the world. what rings so untrue about it is like it has the sound of one of those boosters in a western town in the 1880s. It's like the gold rush is coming, and come and buy your spades and shovels from ChatGPT 4 because it's all going to be great out here. And if he wasn't a salesman for his product, I would be interested to hear. Well, I'm interested to hear what he says anyway. But I would like to hear what he said if he held no stock in his company or the profit-making derivative thereof.
Let's end this interview in the best possible place, which is fear. I feel like I really loved what you were saying a moment ago, Jesse, about like this sort of radical freedom of speculation, that it doesn't cost anything to just ask the questions, just do your own research, let's say. And the brilliant thing of the film is the way that the speculative becomes very, very tangible and real for these people. They are actually going to murder someone, and they're very bad at it, and other things then ensue. Picking up also what you were just saying about like the Old West town and Chris's question, there are elements at play in Mountainhead and with the type of characters you're writing about that are ever present, that are perpetual, that are back in like Greek tragedy or, great works of the 20th century. But there is something uniquely horrifying about these four guys and who they represent. And I wonder if you could help me puzzle it out, because it's almost like a Venn diagram of a bunch of things that have never touched before. There is the unchecked ego, there is the enormous money, but there's also this sort of like galaxy brain confidence that what they do is better, coupled with the self-selecting silos that we all live in now, right? Where like me getting my news from Facebook and these four guys getting their news from each other has so divorced them from any lived experience that we are in uncharted waters. I don't know if I'm just pulling this together just on the fly.
He just mostly wants to say he gets his news from Facebook.
I just wanted to see Jesse's face when I said that, honestly. There's some wild stuff going on, guys. I'll fill you in once we stop recording. No, but do you know what I mean? I wonder if you feel, as someone who is listening, reading, researching, processing your own reactions through your work, do you feel there is something unique, or dare I say, uniquely terrifying about this particular moment as illustrated and fictionalized, of course, in Mountainhead?
Yeah, I guess I do. And if this is coded into the film, it's deep in there because I don't think I'd ever conceptualized it like this. But I guess I'm a politics person. I started in politics. It's what me and Sam wrote sitcoms, not in that world, but working on the thick of it was a key thing for me. And even the Succession is in a way about the way in which politics is influenced by legacy media power. So politics is the most important thing for me because it's how we decide how we're all going to try and live together. And I guess politics has, and this is going to be the arguable point, is politics still paramount? Can we organize as communities, democratic communities, to try to create the societies we want to live in? And I guess tech is challenges that because of its combination of media information power about how citizenry experience the world, understand the world, and its capability, its apparent capability to change things so fast that political movements won't be able to respond and provide, the siloing or the rules that we might want to think about. So I'm getting older, and older people tend to start thinking that things might be uniquely different and uniquely bad. And I hope there will be great benefits to the tech revolution we're in, but I'm scared too. And I'm particularly scared about the capabilities of politics to stand up to the demands of tech.
Sounds like we had the same 4 a.m. Yeah. Sounds like Jesse, you and I had the same 4 a.m. last night. That's where my brain went. Good stuff.
Jesse, thank you so much for joining us again. Thanks for this film, and we obviously can't wait to see what you do next. I don't know if you want to do it
fast again so we can talk more.
Seriously.
Hey, it's really lovely to chat, and see you later.
Next
Thanks.
time in person, unless, it all
Hey,
collapses.
let's hope so. That would be really fun. Thank you,
Thank
gents.
you.
Really great questions.
Thank you, Jesse. See you tonight.
See you tonight. Thank you very much, Chris. See you later, Andy.
Bye.
Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to Kaya for producing. Thank you to John. We'll be back on Monday with more Watch. Everybody have a great, safe weekend.